long story short, we were able to transfer the deed of the building because we're a public entity, we're a taxing district, and be able to transfer the deed over to their nonprofit corporation in a very seamless transaction.
What's going on, guys? Time for another episode of Behind the Uniforms. I got off of a plane, forgive my shoddy attire, got off of a plane, came right over here to Texas because I had to meet this gentleman for this very special episode. First, can you just tell everyone who you are?
I'm Frank Beaman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Faith Community Health System in Jacksboro, Texas.
So I wanted to, it's very important to us with this series that we don't just give you the stories of the men and women who serve and protect our communities and our country, but we also want to highlight these patriots who are also supporting those men and women. And so Banning Sweatland, you guys have seen his Behind the Uniforms, you've seen him, he's on our task force, Operation Innocence. Banning called me up and said, listen man, before we film at this special event honoring our wounded officers, there's somebody you have to meet. And he told me you guys made a pretty significant donation to the organization. Let's start there.
Well, it's just all God. I mean, the stars aligned to get this to work out, because we vacated, about 2.5 years ago, we vacated a 60-year-old hospital. There were hundreds of them built across the country back in the 50s under a Hill-Burton Act. And they were built in wings with lots of rooms. That was back when everybody had a patient room. And so we vacated that building with really no expectations of what to do with it. And so about a year ago, I was contacted by a member of the school board who I know real well and asked me if we'd had any plans for it. Well, at the time, we really didn't. And he said he had a gentleman that represented an organization that just wanted to look at it. And well, certainly, we'll show it to anybody. We hadn't had any interest, of course. Nobody wants a 60-year-old building. And so Banning came out and brought some people and looked at the building, and it was literally, couldn't have fit better. And I can assure you that back in the 50s, they weren't planning on having to use a facility in this way. But we worked it out to where, long story short, we were able to transfer the deed of the building because we're a public entity, we're a taxing district, and be able to transfer the deed over to their nonprofit corporation in a very seamless transaction.
Awesome. For those people who don't know Banning, who maybe this is their first episode, can you tell them a little bit about that first conversation, what they're going to be doing with it?
Yeah, Banning approached us and said they were going to be doing some live mock drills, if I say live, but mock drills in real situations, and that the building just was set up so well to do that. You know, the building has 5 wings, and again, multiple rooms down each wing, has an entry area, and also has an emergency room. So as he started talking about the way they're going to use the building, to the point where there's obviously no live fire, there's not going to be any flashbangs or anything that's going to make noise, because the building sits in a residential area. It also has an EMS dorm, which can be used, and then of course has a helipad. So you really thought you were a kid in a candy store, because he was like, look, everything I can set up in here. So you can set up these mock scenarios where you have, maybe it's a school hallway, okay, so you have closed rooms, and you're training individuals on how to respond to active shooter circumstances. And then in addition, you could set up a mock ER. You know, fortunately, we've not had to deal with that significant of an issue, although we do. So you can train security personnel that work in schools and hospitals in this environment, and it just worked out perfect.
This is like a dream come true. If you guys haven't heard of it, it's Emergency Operations Proving Grounds. Banning, who's a police officer out here, was really adamant about wanting to provide training to law enforcement that can't get this kind of training anywhere else. Isn't it sad that we're in a day and age where we have to worry about things like this and train in those kinds of environments?
You know, it is, and I was visiting just last night with a friend who does this kind of training as well in the school arena, and it is strange. You know, 30 years ago, you'd have never thought about this, and even when I was starting my healthcare career, we didn't have this to even think about other than what took place in the ER. But the ER was controlled. You kind of had pretty good security, and we didn't have to deal with much. But to now have to go into having active shooter drills and having to set up scenarios. So this kind of training is going to be huge. You know, the best part about this, and I can't take credit for this, but a very close friend who is an LTC instructor said, you know, we're going to arm teachers. And the state of Texas is taking, I think, some great steps. I understand the Guardian program is going to be great steps at really protecting our kids in the schools. But here's what happens. If you think about, if you're a teacher and you pass the test and you go through the training on paper and you go out to the range and you can shoot at 25 yards and 15 yards and whatnot, are you still equipped to be able to take down maybe it's one of your star students? Right. You know, that's a tough thing to think about. That's right. A tough thing to even talk about. But when you can take that teacher that's willing to go that extra step and you put them in a drill and you put them in a mock area where there's chaos going on and there's noise and there's screaming, and you put them in that environment, now you can train them to be effective defenders and protectors of our children. Absolutely. And that's the only way I can look at it on the positive side, considering that we're even having to have this discussion in the first place.
So you donated that old hospital, and where are we right now?
We are now in our new facility. We are, like I said, a very blessed community. We have just 2.5 years and a $30 million, 85,000 square foot replacement facility. We've brought in multiple specialties and services that were not available in the old building. And just very thankful. We're serving a much larger community. We've gone from a small little hospital now to a small system where we have multiple clinics and other ancillary services.
What's the name of it again?
Faith Community Health System, which is actually a DBA of the Jack County Hospital District. That's the public entity, but we DBA under Faith Community Health System in Jacksboro, Texas.
When I saw that when I rolled in, it struck me as something really special because today there's always controversy over everything, right? And here you guys are not afraid to put the word faith into the name of the hospital.
Not at all. In fact, we stand proud by it. An interesting story about that, when the hospital in 1990 was transferred from the county over to a district, they voted in a district, they had a contest to name the hospital. And someone said, well, let's name it just Community Hospital. And another, someone said Faith Hospital. Well, they simply joined the names to just make it work. So Faith Community, and here's what's great about the Faith Community is we can exist anywhere. Not just here in Jacksboro, Texas. And so we're trying to get our message, even though we are not, to be very clear, we are not a church-affiliated organization, but we certainly are a Christian organization.
Absolutely. I think it's tremendous, and I give you guys all the credit in the world. The place is beautiful. I walked in here, it looked like you opened the doors yesterday. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for taking the 2 seconds that it's going to take you to hit the share button on this video. Getting stories like this about service back to the men and women who serve and protect our communities and our country, and not being afraid to talk about faith in the world today is a pretty powerful opportunity. So thank you for watching. Thanks for sharing. God bless America.